Hello and welcome to the Tracy Sandler Show, brought to you by FIVO. I am your host, Tracy Sandler. I still have kind of my Justin Bieber lost voice. For those of you who don't know, I went to a Justin Bieber concert last week, and on last week's podcast, you could barely understand me. I'm getting there. It's getting better. So I'm excited, though, to be joined by the Athletics' Matt Barrows, who I don't think went to a Justin Bieber concert, so his voice is just fine. Welcome back to the show, Matt.
Thank you for having me. And I'm now sort of recalling a brief conversation we had in the bullpen as we were waiting for practice to open. Might have been last year, might have been the year before. It all runs together. But you explained to me what a believer is,
Yes,
and I think that might have been the first time I've ever heard that. And you said at that point that you are a believer.
very much
And I
so.
wondered, oh, should I be a believer or not? And
Yes.
I'm still not, but I'm open to becoming one.
Well, we welcome any and all believers whenever they want to come in and join. And you're welcome for introducing that phrase into your life. You guys, there's a lot that I add to the 49ers beat, and this is just one of the many perks of having me
I
around.
I can assure you that Mayoko is not talking about Justin Bieber and being a believer and stuff like that. He's
Well,
more
that
like
his
a
loss.
yeah, he's more like a Merle Haggard or sort of like a country rock type of guy.
Well, again, his loss, but maybe we'll do a group outing to a Justin Bieber concert. Who's to say, really? Who's to say? But in the interim, we have some 49ers stuff to talk about. Maybe not as many things as we thought we were going to have to talk about today. We are in day 2 of free agency. Jimmy Garoppolo, at this moment, at the time we are recording this on Tuesday morning, is still a member of the San Francisco 49ers, which is kind of a surprise to most people, maybe including Jimmy Garoppolo. And the Niners have signed Charvarius Ward. It's funny. I keep wanting to call him Charvarius Moore because they also have Tarvarius Moore, and then they have Jimmy Ward. So this is going to take me a beat just to get used to it. But they signed cornerback Charvarius Moore, which was an important addition to a at times beleaguered 49er secondary. Maybe that's a nice way to put that. A 49er secondary who went healthy last year with Emmanuel Mosley and then Ambry Thomas coming on there at the end looked good, but obviously they need some depth there and they need some help. So that was a good signing. Restructured D Ford's contract. And other than that, they haven't done a lot. Laken Tomlinson is moving on to the Jets. DJ Jones is moving on to the Denver Broncos. That's my intro. Matt Barrows, the wonderful and amazing and talented Matt Barrows. I forgot to do like my flowery introduction in the beginning because we were talking about Justin Bieber, so I didn't want to lose that. Where would you like to begin on all those things I just said, Justin Bieber included?
Well, I think fans are probably wondering about Jimmy Garoppolo because the
Mhm.
whole idea was that they're going to trade Jimmy Garoppolo, and in doing so, you're removing the $25.5 million cap hit, which would allow them to do more in free agency, and also would allow them to do their two big deals that they have coming with Nick Bosa and Debo Samuel. So
Mhm.
that hasn't happened. Here we are, basically, a day away from the time that they have to be under the salary cap, the 208.5 million or whatever the number is, and they're something like, I don't know, 10 million above it right now.
Mhm.
I think there are two things happening. I mean, they're obviously trying to trade him, and they'd like to trade him before Wednesday. And the one big quarterback kind of piece to the puzzle that hasn't been inserted yet is Deshaun Watson,
Mhm.
and he's now the prince, and he's kind of seeing his suitors and kind of trying to decide where he's going to go. So that could loosen things up for a last minute trade here. But I mean, I think the 49ers, this is not catching them by surprise at this point, where they have
Mhm.
some restructures. You mentioned D Ford. There are
Mhm.
probably one or two more that they can basically just push a button, and those are done. in which case Jimmy Garoppolo would be on this team when the new league year begins. I do think that that doesn't mean that he's on the team for the season. I think it's something where then the draft becomes the next opportunity to trade
Mhm.
him, and then if not the draft, then we're talking late June, early July, when ostensibly that shoulder is functioning again, and teams can kind of see him in person and see that he can throw and are a little bit more reassured. So I think the 49ers have, plans A, B, and C going with him. I still don't think that any of those plans really include him, um, being on the team throughout the season. I mean, I just feel like that's going to be hard for them to juggle having him there and this idea that it's Trey Lance's offense. It's hard to kind of give Lance that ability if there's a veteran kind of just sitting there in the locker room the whole time.
I absolutely agree with you. It's just funny because at this point, there's this like teeny, teeny, tiny part of me that's like envisioning next season and like, here we go again. So, Kyle, who's your starting quarterback? You guys know who my starting quarterback. I think I've been pretty clear about it. I mean, like the week, and then we're like at the trade deadline next year, and then they trade Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't really think we're there. I just didn't necessarily think we'd be here. It's not shocking, especially after the surgery news. It definitely is not entirely shocking. And you're right, the Deshaun Watson part of it kind of changed everything. But when I saw Pittsburgh sign Mitchell Trubisky, I don't know if it's Mitch or Mitchell. I know he seems to go back and forth, but when they signed Trubisky, I was like, wait a minute, what is happening? And I thought back to the day of the Zooms of the final press conferences after the season, and you had John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan come in and say, which felt like just like something they had to say, but come in and say, Jimmy made it very hard on this year. He played so well. It's not an easy decision. And then you had Jimmy come in right after them, who was basically like, peace, see you guys later. This has been great. And I wish you the best of luck. And I'm looking back on that. I'm like, wait, were they serious? I mean, I don't really think they were, but was that not just lip service? Did they mean that when they came in and like the whole he made it hard on us? I don't think so. I have a question for you. Do you think there's any scenario that if he's not traded by the Wednesday deadline that they just cut him?
No, because like I said, I think that they can make some other moves that
Hmm.
would allow them. I mean, I do think that there's a chance. I don't think that's what they'll do because they do want to get something back for him, and they could. I mean, and even if they kind of held on to him for the whole season, which I think is still really unlikely. Then he would become a free agent in 2023, and then they'd get a comp pick in 2024. And it would probably be a third rounder or so. So, um, I mean, yeah, it's usually in a player's best interest to restructure the contract because
Hmm.
they just get the money more immediately. They get it in the
Yeah.
form of a bonus versus over the course of the life of the contract. So I think it's something that they could do fairly quickly if it came to that. They
Hmm.
could do it at 12:59 p.m. on on Wednesday,
Hmm.
1 p.m. being the deadline to get under that cap. So um, it hasn't gone the way that they thought it would. It is kind of bizarre. This guy led the team, fought through injuries and led the team to the NFC Championship game 2 years after leading the team to the Super Bowl, and they can't trade him, which is counterintuitive, and I think the 49ers, if they were being honest, would say the same thing. You mentioned Mitch Trubisky, Carson Wentz. These are two guys that, to me, in my mind, and I know there's all sorts of opinions about Jimmy Garoppolo, but to me, I'm very certain that Jimmy Garoppolo is better than those two players.
I could not
Um,
agree with you more.
yeah, and has proven it, and proven it time and time again. Um, like you noted, the shoulder complicates things,
Hmm.
and that's why I think holding on to him until the summer um, might be the right move. I mean, I don't think that's what Jimmy Garoppolo wants. I mean, I think if Jimmy Garoppolo thinks that he's going to be on a different team in 2022. He wants to, even if he's not throwing the ball around in May and June, he still wants to be with that team, learning about his teammates, picking up the offense,
Mhm.
all those things. So he'd be in this sort of weird state of limbo for what, 3 more months if that doesn't happen. So they want to get it done. The 49ers certainly want to get it done. But right now it's the Colts, and I just don't know who the Colts are bidding against to get him. So I think that's the reason why he hasn't gone anywhere. I think his market is the Colts, and we don't know yet. And maybe
I
the
think it's true.
Watson stuff will clarify that a bit.
I agree with you. I think it's the Colts, and we don't know. I mean, there were rumors today that all of a sudden Atlanta is in on the Deshaun Watson stuff, and then I saw someone kind of make a joke on Twitter, but then I thought of it. Well, if that happens, are the Colts now trading for Matt Ryan? I mean, I don't know, but it is interesting when you bring up Jimmy Garoppolo, and there are lots of opinions. And Trubisky and Carson Wentz, I agree with you. I think he's better than those guys. I think not only is he better on the field, but then what he brings to a locker room, I think from at least from what I've seen, would be more attractive than maybe those two. Um, excuse me, the Justin Bieber voice is getting me,
Bieber,
but
yeah.
but I think that there's that. So I do find it very surprising, which comes back to the shoulder issue. And I think I'm wondering if because there was so much talk about the thumb and was he going to have surgery on the thumb, and now he's having surgery on the shoulder, and there is the knock on that he can't stay healthy, which I think is always an unfair knock on players. It's football, and I don't really know what a person can necessarily do when a 300-pound man is tackling them, but I mean, there are things that they can do, but the not stay healthy thing, and I just wonder how much of it becomes that, because yes, he led them to a Super Bowl 2 years ago, led them to an NFC Championship game, but I wonder if for teams they look at him and they said, "Yeah, if he can stay healthy," and that
Yeah,
I
I
just
think
wonder how
that's. I
much of that
mean,
comes into it.
yeah, and then even if the Colts agree with you, they're still going to use it as leverage. That the fact that he has been injured and right now he can't throw. So
Right.
Chris Ballard is on the phone with John Lynch saying, "Yeah, I like your guy, but gee, I'm not going to give up a second round pick for a guy who's been
Matt,
injured
hold
as
on
much
one
as
second.
he is."
I'm gonna go get some hot tea. I'll be right back.
Okay,
This is like actually no, I think I'm good. We'll just cut that little I think I'm good. Shades of that Mike McDaniel press conference where I was choking to death and tried to leave.
I've done that
Uh,
before.
okay. I think we'll just go to we'll have them edit to this. All right, we'll go in. We'll have you start with even if the Colts agree with you. So
Okay,
three,
you ready?
two, yep, go.
Yeah, I think you're right, and even if the Colts agree with you, they're still going to use all that for leverage
Hmm.
in dealing with John Lynch. Chris Ballard will be on the phone with Lynch saying, "Yeah, we like your guy, but he's been injured in the past, and right now he can't even throw for us. Why would I be giving up a second day draft pick for a guy who's not going to throw in May and June?" And is going to be kind of working his way back into shape before training camp. He's going to be behind the 8 ball to begin training camp and to begin the season. So it just gives the Colts more leverage, and that's why getting another team in the mix, whether it's New Orleans or I don't know who the other team would be. Carolina. There just
Hmm.
hasn't been. I checked in with the Carolina writers yesterday, and none of them thought that the Panthers were hot and heavy for Jimmy Garoppolo. So I don't know whether that's true or not, or whether Carolina would reassess or what. But I think for the 49ers standpoint, Deshaun Watson going to Carolina would probably be the best scenario,
Hmm.
because it might put New Orleans in the mix. Now, maybe New Orleans decides, you know what, we're just going to stick with Jameis Winston, who's a free agent,
Hmm.
as our starting quarterback. And my point is that it would really help speed things along, I think, if there were two teams, the Colts plus whoever it is that suddenly had interest and were making bids for Jimmy Garoppolo.
And I think it's going to come down to what happens with Deshaun Watson. I mean, really, and I think that's going to, the speed of it is going to happen. He gets traded today, he gets traded in the morning. I think things then, in my opinion, will happen relatively quickly on the Jimmy Garoppolo front. But I could be wrong about that. And then, from the 49ers perspective, it's interesting. Of course, they want to get this done. But if he were to be hanging on until, let's say, he could throw again and they were just going to have him on the roster, it's an interesting dynamic because since he won't be throwing and since he'll be rehabbing, they still could proceed as planned with Trey Lance. It's still his offense. He's still getting all the reps. There's no quarterback controversy because one of the quarterbacks can't throw. So if that is the worst case scenario and that's what happens, I guess from the 49ers perspective, it could be worse in theory.
Yeah, and that would be a good question. I mean, let's say that they did hang on to him until late June, July. Where is he at the team facility rehabbing? Is he in LA where he has a home and where he had a surgery? Is that where he
Hmm.
rehabs? I mean, if that's sort of the argument for doing the trade now, if you're the receiving team, is that
Yeah.
you would have this guy, in your building, like I said, learning the offense, meeting the coaches, and also rehabbing with your medical
Your
staff,
people.
which
Hmm.
ostensibly you trust more than any other team. So it would just be a weird dynamic to have him still on the team, still on the roster, but not there. And with everybody just sort of assuming that he's going to be playing for another team at some point. Um, I mean, that's why I feel like Garoppolo, the 49ers, and probably the team that's gonna get him, at the end of the day, probably all want it to happen, soon, at least,
Hmm.
before the draft or during the draft, because that's when the players start really getting into the building and, doing all the things that they're doing to prepare for the next season.
And OTAs, if I'm not mistaken, begin about a week and a half before the draft. So I think from the 4 hours perspective, having it done before OTAs would really be ideal. But it could have if it's not done tomorrow, it probably won't be done till day one of the draft or day two of the draft. But we'll see. Time will tell. That's my new phrase, Matt. Time will tell. I'm
That's a
bringing
good
it back.
that's a good catch-all. You know what? Time will tell. Time will
Time will
tell.
tell. Time will tell. Chris Peterman laughs at me because I say it all the time, and then and he's like, you know what? You're right. Time will tell. There's really no one can argue with that. No one can argue with that. So in the meantime, as time is telling about Jimmy Garoppolo, let's talk about the addition of Charvarius Ward. Again, wanted to call him more because of
Is it
Charvarius Ward.
Charvarius Moore or Charvarius Ward?
It's Charvarius Ward, but
Well,
I
they
almost
they've got
called him more.
they've got
Tarvarius.
A Tarvarius, and a Contavious on the team.
Wow.
They sound like Roman kings. I don't know whether you ever took Latin, but we had to
I
learn all
did.
the Roman kings, and that's what their names sounded like.
It's the new
Tiberius,
Smith. Because remember they used to have Alex Smith, Justin Smith. I think there was another Smith. Like
Alden Smith. Yeah.
Alden Smith. Yeah, they had a lot of Smiths. So now it's the it's that. And Charvarius, and Contavious. And I'm gonna really have to get used. I keep wanting to say, like I said, Charvarius more because of Tarvarius, but Charvarius Ward, and I'm gonna remember that because as I said on Twitter, and as you know, I'm really proud on this. He and Jimmy will be the wardens of the 49ers secondary.
Love it.
So really,
I see T-shirts in your future there.
I think it's the new the block is hot or whatever that was they had back before. So yep, I'm really proud of that. You guys can have that for free. Go make your shirts. But they add in some much needed depth at corner. You had an interesting tweet last night about how you see it all playing out with the season. I would love for you to share that with our listeners.
Well, as soon as I articulate this, it'll be proven wrong, but I'll say it anyway.
Well,
I
of
mean,
course.
this is just a guess, but this is assuming that Kwan Williams does not come back, and I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. He's not going to command a huge salary in
Hmm.
2022. But if they're working with this group that they have now under contract, I think it would be a scenario where the two older guys, they're both 25. That tells you quite a bit about the cornerback group. that
Mhm.
the graybeards are only 25 years old, but it would be Ward and Mosley who would be the starters on the outside.
Both will be 26 when the season starts, though, so
That's true. That's true.
father
And then,
time. Father
yeah,
time.
exactly. Only time will tell. Time will tell
Time will tell.
about those guys. So, and then in this day and age, as you know, they play so much nickel that in nickel situations, I would imagine that Mosley, who has played a little bit of nickel in the past, would slide inside, and that Ambry Thomas would come off the bench, and he'd probably end up playing, 65, 70% of the snaps anyway. So he would be like a starter. But you would have these
Mhm,
three young guys who would be your main players there. And then the next year, Emmanuel Mosley becomes a free agent
mhm.
in 2023. So then it would be Thomas and Ward who kind of take over, and then hopefully Diamondor Lenore has matured to a point where he could play nickel or some scenario
Mhm.
like that. I think that's probably the long term plan at that position.
You mentioned Ambry Thomas, of course, and I just had to take a
Did he
moment
go
because
to
on this
um did he go to Michigan? I
he did, he
forget where
went
he
to the
went to
University of
school.
yeah, he went to the University of Michigan, and we haven't talked about him for a little while on this podcast, and so for those of you who thought I forgot about him, I just wanna take a moment to say Ambry Thomas forever, and the only problem I have with Matt's scenario, which makes complete sense and I totally agree with, is that I would like Ambry Thomas to be definitely a starter, but that's just because he went to Michigan. Other than that, I don't have a big dog in this fight, but
Well,
nonetheless,
well,
we
what
just
are
hadn't
the what
talked
are
about him
the
in a while.
what are the chances that all three of those guys are healthy for all 17 games this coming season? I think the chances are probably 5%. I mean,
I'd
this
say
is
it
the
would be a
NFL. Guys are hurt round the clock. So,
it's
Ambry Thomas will definitely be starting. Well, even as a nickel guy, he would be starting,
that's true.
maybe
That's true.
three-quarters of the games.
It's the
A
NFL and
anytime
the
they play the
49ers.
Cardinals, anytime they play the Rams, that's 4 games right there that he would be a
That's true.
starter.
That's a very good point. And the 49ers secondary is not injury prone might be a strong word, but so I think you're right. I think we're going to see a lot of Ambry Thomas. There was a time on this podcast, really from week 18 through the end of the 49ers season, that Ambry Thomas was brought up frequently, quite often. And I just didn't want my people to think I forgot about him. So I'm glad you brought him
No,
up.
no, never, never in life.
No. Go blue. Go blue forever. Ambry, I got you. So that is that. Okay, so they lost Laken Tomlinson, which is a big loss on that offensive line. They lose DJ Jones, not unexpected. I had felt that of the Jaquasi chart, K1 Williams, Laken Tomlinson, DJ Jones, kind of Laken was the best chance of coming back, but I was, of course, proven wrong, as I many times am. Big loss on the offensive line. DJ Jones is obviously also a huge loss for San Francisco. And John Lynch had made a joke when we talked to him at the combine and said if DJ had wanted to stay, he sure made it very difficult. But the Laken Tomlinson one to me is one of the biggest ones because you have here a essentially rookie quarterback. Yes, he's in his second year, but he is essentially going to be a rookie quarterback. And there had been continuity along that line. So where do you think they make up for it? Is it on the roster? Is it in the draft? It is a decent offensive lineman draft, but I would love to hear your thoughts on where you think that gets made up for.
Well, I think it's a good question. They ended up basically paying Charvarius Ward the same amount of money that Laken Tomlinson is
Mm-hmm.
making, and I've heard a lot of people say, "Oh, well, it's just because cornerback is more valuable than guard." I mean, you can kind of expect to pay that for a cornerback, but you don't want to pay that for a guard. I'm not so quick to reach that conclusion to your point because you are breaking in a young quarterback, and you do have a good thing going on the left side between Trent Williams and Laken Tomlinson. Laken Tomlinson doesn't get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Two of your last 3 seasons have been just destroyed because of injuries, or two of the last 4 seasons. So I don't know. I'm not so quick to make that conclusion. Um, I don't think it'll be in the draft that they bring in another guard. Obviously they want Aaron Banks to step into. one of those spots. I mean, right now they've got holes at left guard and right guard.
Yes, they
And we
do.
still haven't gotten really the full definitive answer on whether Alex Mack is coming back. I think the team feels good about that, but that's not
Mhm.
set in stone. So as far as I'm concerned, you've got Laken Tomlinson on the left, and you've got Mike McGlinchey on the right, a tackle, and then you have these three spots in the middle
Oh, you mean
that are
Trent Williams on the left. You said
protecting
Lakin.
your young
Mm.
quarterback. So I think that if I'm them, I'll put it this way: if I'm them, I go for a veteran guard, and those guys have been flying off the shelf. There were
They have been.
2 or 3 more signings this morning at that position. So there's not a lot out there. There's not a lot of proven talent out there. But so you got Banks at one spot. I don't know. I mean, are you going to go Brunskill another year at the other spot? Are you going to put Jalen Moore into guard? That would give you two really young guys. So I don't know what the answer is at that spot, but the interior line has been a problem for the 49ers for the last 3 years,
Mhm.
and they seem to have gotten worse at it at
Yeah.
that spot. So I think that's a big question mark as we go, into free agency and basically into the off season here.
And Aaron Banks is such a question mark, and I can't imagine that they're counting on him. I mean, I think with Aaron Banks, it's very much of like, well, let's see if he can be what we thought he would be when we drafted him where we did. But that is a huge, huge question mark. And by letting Lake and Tomlinson go, it almost feels like they're willing to take that chance. Though I do think they will bring in a veteran, but it'll be interesting to see. But it's interesting when you see all the guards, as you said, coming off the shelf. It just like offensive line in the league generally are not the strongest thing the NFL's got going on right now. And when there are guys available, they are being snapped up quickly and they are getting paid because there's just not that many of them. And it's such an important position. And the one thing about the draft, going kind of maybe going counter to what I said earlier, offensive linemen take some time. So it's not a position that you draft them and they come in right away and are just, fantastic. That's a position that takes some time to develop, which maybe is a good thing on the Aaron Banks front, but we'll see. It's going to be it's going to be interesting. I'm just going to go ahead and say it again. Time will tell.
I think time will tell at that spot.
I think time will tell. All right, before I let you go, we're going to talk about a couple not 49ers things. We're going to call them 49ers adjacent. One, Tom Brady's coming back, not retired. Were you surprised or were you like, this makes sense?
No, I was surprised. I mean, why retire? I mean, it's the world's shortest retirement.
It really is.
There's something happening there, obviously, and probably was you know, familiarity breeds contempt type of thing where, he just got fed up with Bruce Arians or the Buccaneers and,
Mhm,
probably a lot of frustration coming out of that loss to the Rams and decided that I don't want to do it anymore. But then, you know, he's such I think this is my guess, in his mind, he realized, that okay, I'm 40 some odd years old, but I still feel really good, and I
mhm,
still have this hunger, this desire, this I want to make amends for that loss that we just had to the Rams. So
mhm,
I just think it all. I think he asked himself, why did I retire again? There's
mhm.
no real reason to. And that's why he's back. But it was odd, and we saw this happen with Brett Favre a few times
Mhm.
where he thinks he's ready to retire and then he realizes he's not. So until I think the game pushes you out for these guys, you're never going to be done with it.
And then my next 49ers adjacent, just as we saw a very different Trent Baalke when he was the GM of the 49ers and the way he approached free agency. The Jacksonville Jaguars are literally just down, like driving down the street and being like, who wants a contract? How much can we pay you? And do
Wait,
you
have
want to
you
play
been
for our
offered
team?
a contract yet?
Not yet. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm a little offended because I
Yeah.
feel like at this point, it's just me. Have you been offered one?
No, nothing, nothing.
I like it's
Um,
and also they could get me like probably like at the league minimum would be fine. I'd be down.
I've got a couple of riders in my contract. I need my. I don't want to shower in front of a bunch of guys, so I need my
That's fair.
own locker
Hmm.
room, my own restroom. You know, I'm a bit of a germaphobe, so I need like Purell. I mean, so there's a lot of complications in mine. So I don't know. That may
That
be what's holding it up.
I have the opposite of a no trade clause. My clause is like, no, please trade me. Like, I'd like you to trade me as quickly as possible out of Jacksonville. So they seem to think I'm not committed. So I think that might be the issue
Well,
with
I
my
think I think
contract.
your issue, Tracy, is that your both of your ACLs are intact, and
Oh, that's
Trent
true.
Baalke's looking at that. He's like, "Ooh, gee, that's not my kind of player."
That's probably true. He's like, the health there is too much. Though, God, what an honor. I'd get to play alongside Aiden Hutchinson, who was the presumptive number one pick
That's
in
true.
the
That's
draft.
true.
So I'd have that going for me. I'll call him back and say, I'll waive all the other stuff. Let's do this. Matt, thank you very much for joining me today. We will have to keep a very close eye on what happens with Mr. James Richard Garoppolo.
Yes, any day now. I keep telling people, "Oh, it's going to happen any day now."
I've been saying it
It
for
may
weeks.
be it may be June 28th or July 3 or July
Any
19th
month
or something
now.
like
That's
that.
what I'm gonna start telling people. Now when people ask me, because I'm like, oh, absolutely, and it should be done by the end of the week. Now I'm gonna be like, I would say sometime in the year 2022, Jimmy Garoppolo will not be on the 49ers. I just don't know what that time is, so
It's
stay
true.
tuned for that.
It's true.
Well, we are brought to you
Probably sometime this decade, it happens. I'm
sometime
thinking.
this decade, sometime, or
Yeah.
he just stays there forever. It's a thing, which would be strange. Well, Matt, thank you for joining me. And you guys, thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, and I know what you did, I know that you did, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Follow us on Instagram at Fangirl Sports Network. We are brought to you by Bet Online, and I will talk to everybody on Friday. Bye, all.